Greetings, loyal ladies and gentlemen of the Garbage Gang. Before we get to this evening's episode, I want to just talk a little bit about Voddie Baucham. If you are unfamiliar with Voddie, he's the pastor. He passed away earlier this week. Obviously, our hearts go out to his wife and his children. But Voddie did some very important things during his lifetime, and he reached a lot of people. In particular, his lecture on why I believe the Bible is what he calls it is something that I truly encourage you to check out. If you're somebody who is questioning things, if you've been interested in God, if you don't believe in God, and you want to hear a different perspective, I'd suggest you check it out. He was a very articulate individual and very logical individual. He laid things out in a way that made sense. You know, we've had a rough year this year in the Christian community. We lost Voddie Baucham. We lost John MacArthur. Some of my greatest memories on this planet were lifting weights outside at Gold's Venice and listening to sermons by John MacArthur and Voddie Baucham. They're just excellent pastors. Fortunately, we live in an era where their preachings, their teachings will be archived for our lifetime, and we can always check them out. But I'm going to link Why I Believe the Bible, Voddie Baucham's lecture, in the description, so I encourage you to check it out. He's a really great guy, great teacher. With this country, we're seeing over and over again that when people put politics over Jesus, it doesn't work out well. It's not even particularly for the left. I know that we criticize the left because of their values, and it seems that they're often the opponents of Christianity in many aspects. It's not good when people on the right substitute politics for Jesus either. We see a lot of people who put politicians in particular or the party platform, this becomes their identity rather than being a Christian. And I'm not shy about the fact that I'm a Christian, and I encourage other people to look into it if you haven't. And maybe make friends with somebody who likes to talk about this stuff. It's okay to challenge yourself intellectually. There's this notion out there that if you're a Christian, that means you have to set aside your intellectual abilities and your critical thinking skills. That's just not the case. Check it out. Voddie was an excellent pastor. I'm really appreciative to have found him and listened to his teachings and his explanations for a lot of different things. I'm sure you're going to enjoy it, even if you're not somebody who typically listens to preachers. It's definitely worth the listen. So, Voddie, we know that you're with Jesus now, and I'm sure everybody who has listened to your messages is going to miss you. With that, here's the episode.
I would definitely categorize myself as a conservative Christian. I find that the Republican platform fits more in line with my ethics and my values. For me, being a black conservative, that's been very, very challenging because you're sort of assumed that if you're black in America, you're voting Democrat. And when you don't, then people think something's wrong with you.
So you've had those experiences before?
Oh, my goodness. I can't even begin to tell you the number of experiences that I've had.
So you think it's entirely possible to be an intellectual and still believe in Jesus Christ?
Oh, sure, absolutely. People think that like science and religion are completely incompatible, but it's not. Hillary Clinton said, we really need to stop demonizing people. And then in the next breath, she was talking about the Madison Square Garden rally that Trump had and comparing it to the 1939 neo-Nazi rally or American Nazi Party rally that they had. The American people, vast majority of them were against illegal immigration. The gender ideology stuff was a big problem for a lot of Americans. They didn't believe that biological boys should be competing against biological girls or biological men competing against biological women, and that was a big deal.
Turn the lights down, and just put this on. It's right behind you.
The only garbage I see floating out there is just supporters.
Greetings, loyal ladies and gentlemen of the Garbage Gang. Welcome to another episode. Remember, if you want to be a member of the Garbage Gang, we need you to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We've got a special guest in studio today. He hails from the People's Republic of New Jersey. It's the first time that we've had one of our guests who's from the People's Republic to cross into enemy territory, so to speak. He's a wonderful man. We'll talk about how we met and all that he's done. Paul Roberts. At Paul Roberts Pro on Instagram. Did I get that right?
Yes, you did.
Paul, thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely great to be here. Thank you for having me.
So the way that we met was I was looking through the comments on an Instagram video, and it had something to do with the resurrection, and you laid out a very concise intellectual point as to why you believe the resurrection is true. And I made a comment back, started following you, and noticed that you're into fitness, and your page was dedicated in many respects towards fitness, and I've been following you ever since. We started to converse. I'm glad to finally have you here.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. It's great how you can connect with people on social media now, people that you would never meet in real life. So glad that we were able to connect.
How did you start your Instagram page? Because it looks like from the very beginning of that page, you had footage of you in the gym exercising.
Yeah, I'd always gotten compliments on my physique, and guys in the gym were always asking me questions. And then one guy said, why don't you start posting things on social media, because people are really into it and you might be able to help people. So that's how I started my Instagram page, just getting some clips of me in the gym, doing certain types of exercises.
And what was your background? Were you a competitive bodybuilder?
No, I was a track guy in high school and college. And then after I stopped running, I decided, why be a scrawny track guy and start getting into the gym and the weights and all that. So.
And where was college?
College was Dartmouth College in New Hampshire.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah.
Where were you raised?
I was raised in Massachusetts. I was actually born in Canada. My parents are from Jamaica. A lot of Jamaicans immigrate to Canada just because it's part of the British Commonwealth. And so I was born in Canada, lived there until I was like 5, and then we moved to Massachusetts. So I was primarily raised in Massachusetts.
An athlete growing up?
Athlete growing up, yeah. I've always played sports, was always very, very active.
So when you were finished competing in college, you went directly towards, I'm going to start lifting weights, or was there
Absolutely.
a period?
No,
Really?
that's what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to keep myself in good physical condition, and so I thought the gym is the best way to do it. And I'd always been fascinated by weightlifting. I'd always looked at the bodybuilding magazines and stuff online. So I thought, why not try it out? And my body responded pretty well to it, so I just became an obsession almost.
You must be a very focused guy, a very disciplined guy. I trained as hard as anybody. You talk to people who I played college ball with, they'll say it was the hardest worker in the program.
Sure.
But once that ended, I felt like there's no reason to train. What's the point of getting into the gym and lifting weights if there's no goal? I'm not trying to play sport. Kenny Powers said, I'm not trying to be the best at exercising. And it took, unfortunately, several years for me to realize that, no, the workout is the thing, and it's good all around. You knew that right away, though.
So the competition was not against other people. The competition was with myself. And I've always been super, super competitive. So weightlifting was really a great way for me to channel that competitive spirit by seeing how much I could lift, seeing how many reps I could possibly do, seeing the progression. So that's sort of what kept me going. And then also, from a Christian perspective, our bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit. We're supposed to take care of our bodies. And so I see a lot of people, like you were saying, like after you're done competing in school, they end up just falling completely off the wagon. They don't care anymore. I'm not competing. But we have to take care of ourselves. God has given us this blessing of a body. If you don't have your health, what do you have?
It really does lead to bad things, not only physically, but mentally.
Oh, yeah.
If you're not working out, if you're not
mental
training.
clarity is huge. It's huge. Energy levels, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, sure.
And so you train several times a week?
Oh, every day, pretty much.
Every day? Wow.
Every day, pretty much. Not weights every single day, but split it up between cardio, calisthenics, weights.
You've had a couple of speed bumps over the last few months with some injuries and
Oh,
surgeries.
my goodness. Yeah. So in December, my right hip was replaced. And then my shoulder had been bothering me for years, and I knew something was wrong with it. And then after my hip was done, I went back to the gym, and my shoulder was just in a bad, bad way. And so I went back to the same hospital, the Hospital for Special Surgery in New York City. And the shoulder specialist took a look at it and is like, you have to get it replaced.
So when you were recovering, how much physical activity were you able to do?
Very little. It was really, really tough for me because I've never really sort of been injured before. So this is the first time I've ever had any kind of surgery. So it was very, very difficult mentally to be able to keep myself positive and not being able to go to the gym, because the gym is really like my second home almost. It's a way that keeps you sane. It's a way that keeps you sort of motivated. But when you can't do it, what do you do? What do you turn to? So it's tough.
So what did you do?
Did a lot of reading. And actually, you know what? People have been telling me about The Chosen forever, and I'd always wanted to watch it. And so when I was like basically incapacitated with my hip, I decided, why not binge watch The Chosen? So I watched like all 5 seasons.
What'd you think of it?
It was awesome. It was absolutely remarkable. I thought that the way that Dallas Jenkins had presented the gospel story was so unique. Because if you think about the Jesus stories that you watch, are sort of chronological. So Jesus did this, Jesus did this, Jesus did this, Jesus did this. And there was never really any character development. You saw the stories, you saw Jesus, but you didn't know really much about the disciples. You didn't know much about the other players in the gospel story. And what Dallas Jenkins did, which I think was unbelievable, was really turn it into this real life story where you saw behind the scenes, you saw the development of the disciples, you saw their interactions, you saw their trials, you saw the things that they struggled with. It was really, really, I highly recommend it to anybody.
So there are some people who are concerned that it's obviously not a word for word depiction of what's in the Bible. Did you have any concerns about that going in?
I didn't because I think it's true to the gospel story. I think that there obviously are things that they do which don't reflect scripture, but I think that they did a very, very good job at keeping true to the gospel, but yet adding in things that don't necessarily take away from the gospel.
And they don't claim it to be a word-for-word translation at the outset,
And they don't.
so you know what you're getting.
Exactly. And what was really fascinating to me is a number of people who are like atheists or not even believers who love it. So that really shows the strength of what they've created.
And Rumi's an incredible actor.
He's amazing. He's absolutely amazing. Yeah. I'm ready for season 6.
Had the opportunity to meet Jesus in the lobby of a dentist's office in Beverly Hills a couple of years ago.
That is awesome. Yeah, he's a tremendous representative of the faith.
And very, very humble, polite guy. Didn't want to bother him or anything like that, but you could see him talking to people and just being totally gracious with his time.
Sure. Well, talking about humility, I mean, this is one of my. I love this shirt. It's actually a shirt from Brian Shaw. I don't know if you know who Brian Shaw is. He was the world's strongest man for like 5-6 times. And during the pandemic, I started watching a lot of his videos, just trying to get ideas about how to do home workouts. And I saw his merch, and I was like, you know what? A lot of what he sells really resonates with me, and this is a great one. Work hard and stay humble, because we really, it's very easy to lose your humility, but we have to remember how important humility is to how we present ourselves, and also we have to remember what was the greatest sin. The greatest sin was pride. That's why Satan got kicked out of heaven, for pride. So got to stay humble.
And I guess if you're somebody who's disciplined and you're achieving goals, that can get increasingly more difficult the more successful that you are.
Absolutely. And you have to stay grounded somehow, and certainly through my faith and through scripture and trying to live the gospel life. That's really helped me immensely, and surrounding myself with people who also have the same beliefs and opinions, worldview.
So when you were finished competing in college, what was next for you?
Well, I actually ended up going to a law firm in New York City and working for a couple of years, because I wasn't really sure if I wanted to go to law school or not. And so I worked at a big law firm in New York City and was a legal assistant, and did that for a couple of years, and realized that I could probably do the law school thing, because I wasn't really sure if I wanted to make the investment and spend 3 years more in school if I wasn't really sure about it. So yeah, I did that for a couple of years, worked really, really hard, working like 80, 90-hour weeks. Was crazy, but it was a very, very good experience. Gave me a good sense of what it is like to be a lawyer at a big law firm. And then I went to law school.
Where'd you go?
Yeah, I went to Northeastern in Boston.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was like sort of return home. So I actually just lived at home with my folks and commuted into the city, which was nice.
So the values that you seem to project in your social media, even though you often say, "I don't want to be political."
Sure, yeah. I try to be sort of down the center, just so that I don't want to turn people off.
Yeah, that's okay. But the values individually that you seem to support seem like they're sort of on the conservative Christian side. Is that fair to say?
Very much so, yeah. I would definitely categorize myself as a conservative Christian, definitely.
And how was that in law school? Was that rare? Or was that your worldview at the time, or did that change?
Yeah, I would say that I was still pretty conservative, and Northeastern tends to be a little bit on the liberal side. So yeah, it was hard to find people that I could really sort of talk to about issues because everybody was sort of really, really, really liberal and far left. So it's been challenging, and I think with the the recent things that have been going on in the country, with the divisiveness and people being on one side or the other, and especially for me being a black conservative, that's been very, very challenging because you're sort of assumed that if you're a black in America, you're voting Democrat, and when you don't, then people think something's wrong with you.
So you've had those experiences before?
Oh my goodness, I can't even begin to tell you the number of experiences that I've had in talking about my political beliefs and the sort of side of the aisle that I stand on. And a lot of people believe that you voted against your best interests, that you are somehow catering to white people by voting for somebody who they think is a the mustache man and and a fascist and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's been challenging. It certainly has been challenging.
So what would you say to somebody who claimed that as to why it's not true?
Oh, I mean, I'm not sure how you can compare President Trump to arguably the most evil person that ever existed. It's just not true, and it's fear-mongering. And if we're really going to dial down the temperature, I think in the country, then we have to get away from this hyperbole. We have to get away from demonizing. And I found it really interesting because I was just watching a video of Hillary Clinton during the last election cycle where they were interviewing her, and she said, we really need to stop demonizing people. We really need to start bringing the temperature down. We really need to start reaching out to the other side. And then in the next breath, she was talking about the Madison Square Garden rally that they had, where Trump had, and comparing it to the 1939 neo-Nazi rally or American Nazi Party rally that they had. And I mean, I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, how is that even possibly close to being an American Nazi Party rally when there were people from the Holocaust who were actually at the rally? There were Jewish people who were at the rally. So I don't know. It's very, very interesting to see this constant demonization of President Trump and his supporters on the part of the people from the left.
The hypocrisy is extremely frustrating. I've seen a lot on social media regarding the Comey indictment saying to go after your political opponents is the worst thing that can be done for our democracy.
Right.
I'm sorry. Am I taking crazy pills? What just happened a few years back?
Yeah,
Does everybody have this sort of a memory?
Right. It happens on both sides. And I think until we can get to a point where we understand that it's politics, to make it sound as though they didn't go after President Trump and they didn't weaponize the legal system, against him, that they didn't utilize the legal system and the Department of Justice to silence people, in 2020 when there was quote unquote disinformation or misinformation, regarding the pandemic or with respect to the Hunter Biden laptop. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg testified in congressional hearings that he had pressure from the Department of Justice to make sure that Facebook and other social media platforms did not have any of that information. So in a sense, you had the government stepping in and getting private institutions to take away First Amendment rights, which is a problem.
Did that concern you at the time as well?
It did. It really did. It did concern me because we live in the greatest country in the world. We live in a country where we can express ourselves. We live in a country where we don't have to fear for saying certain things, but it seemed like there was a lot of cancellation going on during that time, and that was certainly problematic for me.
And what area of the law do you practice these days?
So I'm a corporate lawyer. Yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah. So I primarily do financial products at an investment bank in New York City.
And you have an acute understanding, obviously, of constitutional law through your education and everything like
Sure.
that, even
Oh,
though it's
yeah.
not something that you practice
Sure.
regularly.
Mm-hmm.
And so is that when you see First Amendment suppression, we see Second Amendment suppression.
Sure.
Is that sort of why you've leaned towards the right, because the suppression seems to come from the left these days?
I don't know if it's really more a constitutional issue. For me, I find that the Republican platform fits more in line with my ethics and my values. Abortion is a big issue for me. pro-life is a big issue for me, and that's one of the things that I find that the Republican platform, stands to. I think that they've watered it down a bit over the last several years, and they're not quite as strongly pro-life as I would like them to be, but they're still way more pro-life than the Democrats are, and so that was a big deciding factor for me in terms of the party that I wanted to vote for. And also just, I think that like I say, that they're more Christians, but it just seems like there's not this idea that you can't talk about your faith on that side of the aisle as opposed to the other side. So,
do you ever feel like that professionally, that you're not supposed to talk about your faith?
Oh, I mean, I work in New York City. I work in New York City, so yeah, I keep my political beliefs, I keep my religious beliefs sort of under wraps a little bit. So
is that frustrating?
It is. It is frustrating because I think that you find that a lot of these corporations have sort of bought into that sort of woke agenda. And as a result, I think that if you come out as a conservative, that could be political suicide, or not political suicide, but more, your professional suicide.
Professional suicide, for sure, right?
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people who, and when this was happening and they were calling it cancel culture through those years, and they were saying, well, your words have consequences when you're dealing with private entities. It's not the government doing it, so it's not a First Amendment issue. And then now, in the wake of the Charlie Kirk situation, when you've had people on the left come out and celebrate it, if they face any consequences, again, we're talking about the hypocrisy. People on the left are up in arms that somebody's being terminated or disciplined in the workplace for condoning and celebrating murder.
Right, and that has nothing to do with the First Amendment. And I think that's where the confusion comes, is the First Amendment was created so that the government couldn't stifle your speech. Private institutions can do whatever they want. I mean, if you're acting that way, in a way that doesn't reflect your company's sort of brand well, and I don't think that any company would want somebody getting on social media and jumping up and down in celebration of somebody getting murdered. And so people need to be responsible for their actions, and they have to be held accountable.
Did you hear any chatter of that in the workplace in the aftermath, or did everybody sort of just not address it and not discuss it?
Yeah, didn't hear a whole lot in the workplace. Yeah, not a whole lot. People tend to be a little bit apolitical, in work environments, and I think that's by design. So yeah, didn't hear a lot. More just with my friends and just on social media.
Which is better than an overt pressure, because at least you can work with one another without realizing, this guy's on the other side.
Right. And I do talk to people, and people know, people that I work with closely, they know that I'm conservative, and we have great conversations. And I think that's the thing that Charlie was really trying to do. He was trying to open up those lines of communication. And I found that, when we demonize the other side, we don't want to talk to them. But when we actually have conversations with people, I found that we have a lot more in common than we have differently. I'll give you a great example. There's a guy in the gym, white guy, farm boy from Iowa, assumed just from the demographic that he'd be a Trump supporter, right? You'd think farm boy from Iowa, Midwest, total Trump supporter. So we're talking about the different issues. We're talking about, illegal immigration. We're talking about abortion. We're talking about the economy. We're talking about gender ideology. And we agreed on literally everything. And I was like, so you're voting for Trump, right? And he's like, no, I'm voting for Kamala. And I was like, wow. And I said to him, like, what is it about Trump that you can't vote for him? He's like, I just don't trust him. Even though I agree with a lot of his policies and agree with some of the things on the Republican platform, I just can't vote for him because I don't trust him. So I think there were a lot of people that didn't necessarily buy into everything on the Democrat platform, but they just couldn't bring themselves to vote for Trump. And as you've probably heard throughout the media, there were a lot of people that it was a vote against Trump, not for Kamala. So I think that might be the case for a lot of people.
It's interesting that seems to be what the left is running with at this point in time, though, because you hear less about their policies and what they stand for, but more against why they don't like Trump.
Right.
And the fact is, he's only going to be around for another few years.
That's right.
And, I know that he's been trolling people saying he's going to vote, he's going to run another time and everything like that, and everybody's
constitutional amendment, right?
Everybody's heads explode on the left when they hear that. But it seems to be their identity at this point in time.
And that's a great point that you bring up. And I've talked to a lot of my friends on the left about where is the Democrat Party and where do they go from here? And one of the things that I don't think that they've done well is they haven't done a real good postmortem of why they lost the election. If they looked at why they lost the election, they would realize that the American people, vast majority of them, were against illegal immigration. The vast majority of them, as much as they want to minimize this, the gender ideology stuff was a big problem for a lot of Americans. They didn't believe that biological boys should be competing against biological girls or biological men competing against biological women, and that was a big deal. Even the New York Times said that one advertisement that Trump ran where he said, Kamala's for they, them, that was one of the most successful political ads in American history. So I think that if they really looked at why they lost the election, telling this whole thing where Trump is bad, Trump is evil, Orange Man bad, it just doesn't work. You have to come with issues, and I think if they presented alternatives to what Trump was doing, I think that they might be able to sort of galvanize a lot more support, but they're not doing that at all, and I'm not sure why.
In the direct aftermath of the election, we heard a lot from the left that this is because America is just a racist, misogynist country, and that's why.
Yeah.
From my perspective, while I disagree with that, my position was sort of, sure, that's exactly why you lost. Because if they don't realize why they lost, they'll never win another election.
Right.
It's not going to
Right.
happen if they stick with that and they don't learn from what took place. I think it would be better for the country if they learned from what took place. But I don't think they have it in them to get to a reasonable point on some of those issues that you have
Sure.
mentioned. It seems that they're running more towards the extreme, unfortunately, over the last decade plus. We deal with a lot of people who are considered extremists on the right by some of these people on the left who are simply 2012 Democrats, right? These are
Right.
people who voted for
Sure.
Obama, and because
Yep.
they don't agree with all of the positions that have become more extreme, they're considered extreme, neo-Nazis.
Right, sure.
essentially.
Yeah.
What do you say to people when they claim that Trump is racist? We've heard Charlie Kirk was a racist in the aftermath of this, and that's why they hate him and are happy about what happened.
Yeah, I ask for facts. Like, how do you make the determination that somebody is racist based on? And a lot of people talk about the lawsuit from the 70s, where I think he and his father's company, some of the companies were sued for allegedly not renting to black people. But you have to understand, he and his father were running this massive, corporation. Who said that they were even involved in any of these individual decisions that were being made? Probably not. Chances are very likely that they were not. Another thing that they talk about is the Central Park Five, and saying that whatever he didn't even mention the Central Park Five in that ad. So if you actually look at the ad that was taken out, he doesn't even talk about the Central Park Five. He was just talking about crime and how we need to punish criminals. That was it. It wasn't about the Central Park Five. So, and then you look at the interactions that he's had with black people over the course of his career. What he did with, I can't remember what her name was. There's an entertainer. I think it was Jennifer Hudson, when her family was enduring something. I can't remember what happened. I think a family member had gotten murdered. He put them up in Trump Tower, paid for that. I mean, I think he donated money to Jesse Jackson's presidential run. I mean, he's had interactions with black people. So if you are going to say he's racist, why would he, do business with black people or help black people or do anything? I mean, I think it's just more of the fear mongering, I think. And a lot of people just don't like him. He's a very polarizing individual. So any way that you can sort of get at him, they'll just use it. And, the racism thing's a very, very easy, I think, intellectually challenged accusation.
It's interesting because when you look back on those old episodes of The Apprentice and The Celebrity Apprentice, he was loved by everybody. I mean, there are shots of Kathy Griffin hugging him and kissing him and talking about what a great guy he is.
He was on The View.
He was on The View, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't until he announced that he was running as a Republican that a lot of this stuff started.
Everything changed, and that's the problem. It's like when you categorize a party as being racist or being aligned with racism, and that's the thing that I get from a lot of people. It's like, how could you align yourself with the Ku Klux Klan or neo-Nazis because they all voted for Trump? There are a lot of people that vote. I mean, the party is massive. I mean, there are people with all different ideas, all different worldviews, all different opinions. Just because there are people that I don't agree with who voted Republican, that doesn't mean that I align with them. I clearly can't align with the Triple K. I clearly can't align with the neo-Nazis, but I align with the platforms of the Republican Party. And so trying to lump everybody into, sort of one bucket, I think is intellectually dishonest. It's like, okay, so if that's the case, then I should lump all of you guys in with Antifa.
Right.
You know,
you'd have to say that there's literally no faction of the left that you disagree with and couldn't align with personally on every single issue.
Exactly.
It makes no logical sense.
It doesn't. It really doesn't.
And that's another thing. It seems that the push through the mainstream media, Hollywood, etc., and culturally from the left is that if you're on the right and you are a Trump supporter, and even frankly, if you're a Christian, that it's because you're unintelligent and you're not a critical thinker, and these people are not college educated.
Right.
You're obviously a very intelligent guy, and you've accomplished a lot professionally. What would be your response to somebody who made that kind of a claim?
Again, you can't generalize about people, and that's the danger of when you start to generalize based on a stereotype. There's a stereotype of everybody who voted for Trump as being these, trailer trash guys, in Mississippi and Alabama, and that's not the case. I mean, there are people all over the country in all walks of life who voted for Trump and voted for Kamala. We're all Americans at the end of the day, trying to pigeonhole people into a certain group or a certain category, I think is just furthering the divisiveness in the country. And we're never going to bring people together if we continue to again, demonize people on one side or the other.
So let's talk a little bit, and I want to get into some of this intellectually because I love having these conversations.
Sure.
And you said that being pro-life is a very important issue for you.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a little bit about that. Why do you land on the pro-life side?
I think biblically, I think it's against the Bible. It's against the teachings of Jesus. It's against my faith to be pro-abortion. But also I think that you can look at it outside of any type of a religious perspective or religious type of lens, and you look at it from the point it's a life. I think 95% or more of biologists on the planet believe that life starts at conception. So it's a life. So why should that life be ended because of some inconvenience? It's sort of like this idea that, and we all know the percentages, and people love to argue on the side of the left that, it's the health of the mother and all this. Those are tiny fractional amounts of abortions that are done for those reasons. Most of it is for birth control. And so if you take that argument to its sort of end, well, I can just unalive or kill this being that's inside of me. Why should you not be able to kill a living baby or a living child if it's an inconvenience?
And if that were truly their concern, then we would have legislation across the board that it's unlawful but for these particular exceptions.
Right.
And that is simply not the case. I don't think it's ever going to be the case. I don't believe that that's their true perspective and the true motivation for trying to lax these laws. And from our perspective, I'm lumping myself into to you right now and to that point of view. But from our perspective, when you terminate that pregnancy, as they want to call it, you're ending the life of another human being. You're ending a human life, right? And if you're able to do that, then that's a problem. It's not about the rights of the individual carrying the baby, right? It's not about the mother and restricting their ability to make decisions as to their own body. It's about the life of this third party. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, you are. So my body, my choice is complete BS. It just is. It's not your body inside of you. It's another body. It has its own unique DNA. So this idea of my body, my choice, if we're going to apply murder laws, then why wouldn't you apply murder laws to something that's living within a woman's body? Why do we charge people with double homicide if a mother is pregnant? you know.
And if it
Wonder.
were their body, they'd be the one that dies at the end of an abortion, right?
Right.
And another thing, if you look at even like a surrogacy situation where somebody's carrying a baby and they decided, well, it's my body, I'm gonna have an abortion, that would be a problem,
That
wouldn't
would
it?
be a big problem, sure, of course.
One thing people don't think about, having been through a situation and losing a baby during a pregnancy, and knowing after seeing that baby's heartbeat through the imaging and everything like that, that there are people out there who do that intentionally just makes me absolutely sick.
Yeah, it's very, very hard to comprehend how people can just take a life like that. And, you know, the argument on the side of the left is that, well, the woman's life is going to be ruined and she's not in a position to take care of the baby. But we both know that pro-life organizations have set up thousands of crisis pregnancy centers across the country. You have an adoption waiting list, I think, of over 2 million families that are waiting to adopt. So it's not as though this woman's life is ended. If she can't take care of the baby, these organizations will help place the baby with a great family. And if you can't, you know, and if you don't have the money, they'll help you with money. If you don't have supplies, they'll help you with supplies for the baby. I mean, there are all kinds of organizations out there and ways that you can get support while you're pregnant. And the problem is that on the side of the left, they think, oh, we just want women to have babies and we don't care. That's not at all the case. We want to make sure that the mother and the baby are taken care of properly.
Is there any thought that goes into how people end up pregnant in the first place? Because that seems to not be a part of the conversation when you talk to people on the left.
Sure. I mean, we need to think about this whole, sort of culture of very, very promiscuous interactions. And I think that's a big, big problem. You would think that with the advent of so much we have in terms of birth control that people would, you know, not be having as many unwanted pregnancies, but for whatever reason, you're still seeing women getting pregnant, notwithstanding the fact that there is all of this birth control and ways that you can protect against getting pregnant. But I guess at the end of the day, I mean, if your moral compass is such that you don't care about a life that's created inside of you and you can just go to a place, you know, around the corner and get rid of it, I mean, that's the issue.
Doesn't seem like there's very much personal accountability involved in that.
No, none whatsoever. Because I mean, it's been so trivialized. I mean, you look at some of these interviews on social media, and it's almost like you're going to a doctor's appointment or a dentist appointment or going out shopping. It's like, oh yeah, now I'm just going to go and get an abortion. It's like, wow.
Have you looked into Margaret Sanger much?
Oh yeah. Here we go. Here we go. So Margaret Sanger, I didn't really know that much about Margaret Sanger before, and I did some research, and I found out, you know, she's a eugenist. She basically hated black people, and that's one of the reasons why you have so many Planned Parenthood facilities in black communities, because she basically just wanted to eradicate black people from society. And I'm really having a tough time understanding how black people can support a party that is so pro-abortion when we know this history of Margaret Sanger and we know the history of Planned Parenthood, and people talk about Planned Parenthood as being women's reproductive rights or whatever. I mean, their primary, moneymaker is abortions. And we all know that. And unfortunately, I looked this up recently, unfortunately, 40% of abortions in the United States are committed by black women, which is crazy when you think about it. You have a better chance in New York City of being aborted as a black baby than being born. I mean, that's madness. That's absolute madness. And people wonder why the black community, like the numbers haven't been going up. Well, when you have 7% of the population that's committing 40% of the abortions, your population isn't going to go up.
I did read that statistic that more black babies are aborted than born alive in New York City every year.
Yeah.
That's horrifying.
It's absolutely horrifying. And when you hear those numbers, I don't know how you can't think that there's something wrong. There has to be a cultural shift somewhere. And I think a lot of it has to do with just faith. I think that people have gotten away from any type of grounded morality, and they just want to create their own morality. And that's where you have problems. If you don't have some type of higher power that you can look to that's going to guide you, you'll just do whatever you want. I mean, we've seen that throughout history when people turn away from God and they do whatever they want. It's all throughout the Bible. Every single Bible story is about people turning away from God and the bad things that happen as a result. So
when you look to culture for morality, that is always going to change, and it's changed throughout history. Slavery was once morally acceptable among the culture, obviously. And if we continue to allow the culture to influence morality rather than Bible being that compass for everybody, then it's completely subjective, isn't it?
sure, it absolutely is, and there has to be objective right and wrong. We have to know that, and we don't know that just on our own. What tells me if I'm hungry that I can't go and steal food from your home? What tells me that? Nothing tells me that. If I'm just living on my own and there's no objective truth, or there's no being God in our lives that's going to tell us that that's wrong. We can't do that.
Were you raised Christian?
I was, yeah. My father's a pastor, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm a PK.
What was that like?
Yeah. From when I was, this high, I was going to church. So it's, there's a lot of responsibility when you're a pastor's son, because everybody's sort of looking at you. You have a microscope on you, so you always have to be on your best behavior. But I love it. I mean, now that I'm older and I think about how my parents raised me, I'm just so thankful and so grateful that they raised me in a Christian home. There's a Bible verse that talks about, raise your children up in the way of God, so that when they get older, they don't forget it. And I think that definitely is true in my life. Like, it's really made a significant impact in the way that I've lived my life and the way that I carry out what God has called me to do.
Was there any point growing up, because you're obviously a critical thinker and an intellectual, was there any point that you questioned your faith at all?
I think we all go through that. Yeah, when I got into like sort of my teenage years, I started to think about different things. Never really fell away from the faith, but I started to question certain things, and I started to sort of go through those intellectual exercises in my head as to sort of why does God exist? If God exists, why? Are all the things in the Bible true? How can I be certain that they're true? And a lot of it's faith. When it comes down to it, a lot of it is faith. But there also are some very, very good arguments as to why it's true. So,
are you interested in those arguments as to why it's true? Because when you're talking to non-believers, a lot of times you tell them, oh, it's just faith, or a lot of it is faith. That's not going to convince most of these intellectual atheists. Not that anything will, in any instance, but have you ever gotten into that?
Sure, yeah. And I think that was where we talked about in the beginning about the resurrection. So, I mean, the resurrection is great. And I don't know if you ever watched that movie, The Case for Christ, with Lee Strobel. Fantastic movie. If anybody hasn't seen it, they should see it. It's great movie. But it's interesting how, he found out that the resurrection was where it was. He's like, if I can prove that the resurrection didn't occur, then everything falls down. But he couldn't disprove it because of all of the facts that were there, all of the evidence for the resurrection. And I'll just talk a little bit about it. Why would the gospel writers, if they were lying or trying to fake something, why was it women at that particular point in time that were the first to see Jesus? They wouldn't do that. And I can't remember how many thousands of people were actually eyewitnesses to Jesus being alive. And then all of the disciples, except for maybe John, they all went to horrible deaths. I mean, they were tortured, just terrible, terrible ways to die. Why would you do that for a lie? You wouldn't do it for a lie.
You would think that at least one of them, when they're about to get killed, would say, all right, you got us.
I renounce my religion.
we made it all up.
Right. And you think about all the martyrs over the course of history, the thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people who have given their life for Jesus. Why would you do that for a lie? You wouldn't. You just wouldn't do it. So.
Particularly with the eyewitnesses, we lost a great pastor very recently, Voddie Baucham. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he did a lecture, Why I Believe the Bible, and he talks about how the Bible is a reliable collection of historical documents written by eyewitnesses during the time of other eyewitnesses. Mm-hmm. So if you had these people putting out this narrative about Jesus and the resurrection during that time, you would certainly have other historical literature of people coming out and saying, that's not how it happened at all. These people are completely making it up. Man, today, if we have something that actually does happen, it could even be on tape, you're going to have so many sources saying, that's not how it happened at all. Right. We don't have any from that time when people are claiming that this took place. That's just really inconceivable that it wouldn't be true. And
you also have historical figures who are writing about Jesus as well. I mean, you have Josephus, the famous Jewish rabbi, and you have even Roman figures who are writing about Jesus. So this whole idea that Jesus, well, there's always the argument that Jesus never existed. It's like, okay, Jesus never existed. So, but yeah, you have other people outside of Christians who are writing about Jesus too.
Even secular historians
exactly
almost unanimously agree that Jesus existed.
That's right. That's right.
I think Voddie says, you don't know how stupid you sound when you say something like that. Please
right,
stop.
Yeah.
You're embarrassing yourself.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's not the way to go. There are even people on the atheist side, or the people who don't believe in the resurrection in the scholarly community, when they hear people say that Jesus didn't exist, they say, please stop. You're really making us all look very foolish. You're not helping. Interesting that you brought up the point about the women, because they were not considered reliable witnesses at that point in time.
Not at all.
I believe even in court proceedings, their testimony was of no value.
Second-class citizens, they couldn't get divorced. It always had to be the man who made all the decisions. They were essentially property. That's what they were. And so to have women as the primary eyewitnesses to the first sightings of Jesus was just unheard of.
And with the Gospels, with the way they're written, sometimes critics will bring up that there are inconsistencies within the Gospels with relatively minor and not necessarily substantive things. What do you say to that?
Well, that's what makes it reliable. It's the inconsistencies. Because if it was all the same, then you would think that it was just plagiarized, or everybody got together and let's create something. But when you have the inconsistencies, that's when you know that they're depicting something that actually happened and that they are being truthful in what they're writing. So,
do you think that sometimes when people are agnostic, or they take the position that there's probably God, but who's to say who's right? Who's to say if the Christians are right, or the Muslims are right, or the Jewish people are right? Do you think sometimes that's them being lazy and non-committal because they don't want to take a position? People are very hesitant to take a stand with some of these things, it seems.
Yeah, well, people need to do their research, and they need to examine why people believe that Christianity is true. And I think if people really did the research, just like Lee Strobel did, and you saw what happened. I mean, he's a great evangelist for the faith after being a devout, hardcore atheist. If you do the research, you'll start to see, and God will start to work too. And it's not just about you doing the research, but we all know the power of God and how the Holy Spirit works. Because if you are searching for God, he will reveal himself to you. We don't necessarily know how he will reveal himself to us, but he will reveal himself to you.
So you think it's entirely possible to be an intellectual, critical thinker, intelligent human being, and still believe in Jesus Christ?
Oh, sure, absolutely. I mean, people, like the really hardcore people, think that like science and religion are completely incompatible, but it's not. I mean, you can't literally say God created the world in 7 days. We know that they're dinosaurs. I mean, we have the skeletons. We know they existed before humans. So the idea that we have to sort of discount scientific proof because we're Christians, I think is crazy.
What about the concept of time in and of itself, though? When we're talking about the concept of time, we know so little about time.
We do, and it said, I think even in the scriptures it says, 1 day is, for God is like 1,000 years for us. So when you look at that scripture, it just further reinforces the fact that we don't understand time. And when it says 1 day, that is what God has said, but it doesn't mean that it's 1 day as we understand it.
It's also interesting, though, the way they come to these conclusions, and this is not directly related to dinosaurs or anything, but when we were learning about climate change when I was in undergrad, and I attended Oklahoma Baptist University.
Oh, wow.
And so I was expecting something different than what we ended up getting in the classroom, but we were learning about climate change.
The infiltration is real.
It totally is. We had to sit there and watch Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth
Oh, boy. Okay.
and learn that we were all going to die in 4 years or whatever it was
Right,
a couple of decades ago.
Exactly.
If you're ever having trouble sleeping, you can throw that on. That's the good news. That's the one
That's
thing,
great.
good thing that came out of it. But he was talking about how we know that there's climate. It wasn't him. It was the professor talking about how we know that there's climate change because of the ice cores that they drill out, and they recognize the weather patterns and how it's different today and things are changing. And this is the same man who told us that the Earth was 4.6 billion years old as we were learning about this. And this was probably my first cross-examination of my entire career was in undergrad. And so I asked him, how are they determining that this pattern is different than anything we've ever had? He said, well, they drilled these ice cores and they recognize the patterns based on that. And I said, and how far back did those ice cores go? He said, approximately 5,000 years. I said, didn't you just tell us that the Earth is 4.6 billion years old? He said, yes. I said, well, if that's true, isn't it entirely possible that this pattern that you're seeing over the course of 5,000 years is just a tiny sliver of a larger pattern that we've seen multiple times over the course of 4.6 billion years?
Right.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Right, yeah.
So do you think that everything scientifically is fail-safe? They sort of act like we've got it all figured out today, and I think there are some unknowns for sure. We saw that in 2020, didn't we?
We did. We absolutely did. But I find it really interesting how they were all telling us to trust the science, and then we found out after the fact that a lot of the things that they were saying just weren't even true. But then when you look at, sort of the whole gender ideology thing as well, it's almost as though now we can't say to them, well, you should trust the science, you should trust biology, but now they're saying, well, biology doesn't really apply in this particular situation, which I think is kind of insane.
Does that also wade into the abortion topic and when life begins and everything like that? When talking about trust the science, as you say, you said you got different DNA and genetic
Sure,
code.
yeah, absolutely. It's completely different DNA that's within the woman's womb. So it's not her body. She just happens to be carrying that body inside of her. So,
and if we're gonna, I think that everybody should agree that it's wrong to terminate a life, right? A life. And so if the whole debate is about when life begins, then let's have that discussion. But ultimately, wouldn't you think we'd want to err on the side of if it's possibly a life, we're not going to terminate it? If this is killing a baby, or there's a chance that this is killing a baby, we're not going to do it. You would think in other contexts, if you're going to do something that could potentially kill a baby, you're just going to refrain from doing that. Let's not take that chance.
Sure. But the thing is, people have been so indoctrinated as to what it is that is inside of the womb. They'll call it a clump of cells. They'll call it, it's not a sentient being, so there's nothing wrong with terminating that particular life. And I think that's the problem. And also the whole idea of having like bodily autonomy, that's such a big deal for women on the left and people on the left, like having bodily autonomy and nobody should tell me what to do. But then it's like, do we follow the laws or do we not follow the laws? Murder is wrong, and we all know that murder is wrong. So why is murder right in one instance and not right in another instance? So
one of the other things is they'll say they'll call it a fetus maybe, but the baby can't take care of itself. Well, neither can an infant who's been born, right?
Exactly.
Or what about an infant that needs life support when it's born, or something like that?
Right.
There are many contexts where helpless human beings can't survive on their own, and we know that it's right to intervene in those situations.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I mean, they're grown people who need life support, and they may not necessarily they may be in a coma. So because they aren't, able to express themselves and aren't able to take care of themselves. I mean, what, you just kill them? I mean, it's like, I don't know where you go with that.
One thing you'll see on the left too is if you have a facility with embryos and a facility with live human beings, which one are you going to save first? They'll say that shows that one's a life and the other's not. But if you set up those hypothetical scenarios, you can really do it with two categories that are born human beings, like children versus old people. Who are you going to save first?
That's right.
And I think that most people would lean towards you save the children first in that situation, even though you're not contending that the old people are not living, breathing human beings.
Right.
So a lot of these arguments where they think they're getting you logically, if you're on the pro-life side, they don't add up when you sort of flesh them out, do they?
They really don't.
I want to talk a little bit about illegal immigration, because this is a hot topic.
Well, I'm a legal immigrant, so let's talk about it.
You're a legal immigrant, and when you have this discussion with people on the left, it seems that every time you want to talk about illegal immigration, they'll respond with immigration.
Right.
And it's like you're talking about two different things, having two different conversations. And why is that ultimately they want to claim that if you're against illegal immigration, that you're against immigration altogether?
Because they're just trying to pigeonhole you into something that you don't believe. I mean, nobody on the right, on the conservative side of things, is against legal immigration. Nobody is. No, you've never heard anybody ever say that, unless you're talking about some people on the super far, like, fringe elements of the conservative movement who are just like, white nationalists and, the country should be white and all that. I mean, that's just, you can't use those people as an example. I think everybody who's sane and normal would believe that legal immigration is great. I mean, look at what it has done for this country, and look at how many immigrants have contributed to the beauty and the success of the United States. But the problem with illegal immigration is that we are a country of laws. We are a sovereign country, and why would we not enforce the laws of the land? When you literally break into this country with no documentation and expect to live here, why should you be allowed to, when there are people like myself and my family who came here legally and had to go through the proper channels? Like, basically, when you support illegal immigration, it's a slap in the face to all of the legal immigrants who actually did it the right way.
And does that frustrate you when they sort of classify illegal immigration and legal immigration the same, knowing what your family had to go through in order to make that happen?
Absolutely. And, it just boils down to, are we going to enforce the law? And I understand that people are trying to get to a better life. Nobody is saying that people should not be entitled to trying to get a better life, but you need to do it the right way. When you look at other countries around the world, if you're there illegally, they're going to deport you. They're just flat out going to deport you. If your visa expires, you got to get on a plane and you're going home. So we have a very, very kind and generous country where we don't necessarily just throw people on planes and get rid of them. There's a process that we go through. But when you let in somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 million people illegally and they're not vetted, that's a big, big problem in the United States, and we got to figure out who they are. And we've already seen from the crime statistics, and this is another thing that really bothers me about the left, is they say, oh, well, Americans commit more crimes than illegals commit. But the problem is that they shouldn't have been here in the first place. So the Americans that are being harmed by illegals never would have been harmed but for the fact that they broke into the country. So.
And you'll hear people on the left criticize conservatives as Christians for being against illegal immigration. They're saying, how can you call yourself a Christian if you're sending these people out of the country? You're not accepting them and welcoming them if they're coming from hardship. What would you say to that?
Yeah, nowhere in the Bible does it say that you should not have borders and that you should not follow laws. And this whole argument that they use with Jesus, when Herod was trying to kill the family and trying to kill him, that he went to Egypt and they were illegal immigrants. No, they weren't. Egypt was actually part of the Roman Empire. So, I mean, this whole idea that, somehow the Holy Family were illegal immigrants, that's not even true. And nowhere in the Bible does it say that we are supposed to ignore the laws. We're actually supposed to give to Caesar what is Caesar's and give to God what is God's. So there's an explicit command that we are supposed to follow the laws of wherever we're living.
And if you take that again to a further extreme, it would suggest that if you're a Christian, you have to let anybody into your house who
Right.
needs a place to live, right?
Right.
And even though we're supposed to help take care of people, that would be a very extreme way to take it.
Right.
And I don't think we're commanded to do that.
Yeah,
Just
no,
let
someone-
anybody in who knocks on your door.
Yeah, if
right?
someone breaks into my house, I'm just supposed to allow them to live there. I mean, I don't think I don't think anybody's going to be too agreeable with that.
You'll also hear people say that Jesus would have been socialist. I spoke to Benil Dariush from the UFC about this. He is also a legal immigrant from Iran, and he had a lot to say about that. Have you ever encountered anybody who took that position?
People talk about the hippie Jesus and the way that they portray him in the Gospels. You know, Jesus, he certainly was progressive, if you want to view it as that, because he was preaching something which was against the beliefs of the times and something that was very, very revolutionary, as opposed to what was being taught by the leaders of the time. But people have to remember that whenever Jesus encountered somebody, he always showed them love, but he also said to them, there's one recurring theme throughout the gospel. What does Jesus always say before he leaves somebody? He says, go and sin no more. So when people talk about, oh, well, Jesus just welcomed everybody in, sure, he welcomed everybody in, but that doesn't mean that he condoned what they were doing. He always said that they were supposed to live according to the rules of God.
Don't you think that there's a difference between going out there and trying to help others and getting the government involved? So just because we would like to help people who are in need, being your brother's keeper and things of that nature, doesn't necessarily mean we have to support any government initiative that would redistribute wealth or whatever the case may be, or universal health care type proposal. Do you think those are two separate things as to what we're commanded to do as individuals versus getting the government involved and essentially making the government God?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're very, very different. I mean, I think that, clearly we are commanded to help our brothers, people that are in need. We're supposed to be charitable. But when the government gets involved, that's a little bit different. And especially with, the immigration policy of the last administration, it was basically like, well, if anybody says that they need to come to the United States, we're just going to let them in. I mean, that's just, I don't know how you have a policy like that, or how you are able to run a country, and how you actually are able to provide for the safety and welfare of the people who are citizens if you have that kind of a policy. So,
does the federal government generally do a good job when they have to, where they're entrusted to?
Never. We all know that. We all know that. On the private side, they do things much more efficiently. It's usually a disaster when you get the federal government involved in anything like that.
So there are a couple of other things that I wanted to talk about. Let's go back to God in general and whether God exists, because this is a topic that often comes up. We had a gentleman on our program recently named Ralph Augstros. He just produced The American Miracle, as we talked about, but he also produced a film called Against the Tide, which was Kevin Sorbo and Professor Lennox.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And the premise for that, I guess you could, I don't want to call it a film because it's more of like a documentary, but have you seen God's Not Dead?
I have, yeah. Angel Studios, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yep.
So with Kevin Sorbo's character as the professor raising all these challenges, the students' arguments, many of them were from Professor Lennox.
Oh, wow.
And so what they did was they went back and sort of fleshed out all of these different points with Professor Lennox as to the argument for why God exists, and then ultimately getting into Jesus and the resurrection and everything like that. And do you ever have these conversations with people that it's just as basic as whether there is a God rather than Christianity itself?
Not as much now. I did when I was younger, maybe like in college. I mean, that's when you're really sort of trying to explore everything when you're in college. And so, yeah, I had some conversations with friends of mine who were atheists or agnostics or just really didn't know where they were. And they just asked me for advice. They asked me, well, what are certain books that I can read? where can I go to start learning a little bit more about your faith? Because they knew that I was a PK, a preacher's kid. So I did have some of those conversations when I was in college, but not as much now.
It's interesting because as far back as high school for me, I went to Staten Island Tech, which is one of the STEM schools.
Oh yeah, sure.
A lot of very bright kids. I was the dummy in the school, right? A lot of very bright people, but it seemed like the majority of people were atheists who went there, and I had gone to Christian school leading up to that point, and it seemed you were being attacked on all sides. You dummy, there's no such thing as God. You're constantly having to defend yourself. You don't seem to have had that experience, even though you have many years of education.
Not as
like that.
I actually
elite
haven't.
Institutions.
Maybe I've been lucky. I may have been lucky in the people that I've sort of encountered, but I've never really been challenged like that when it comes to my faith. It's been more sort of mutual respect. We'll discuss the issues. We'll talk about different things, but there's never really been sort of like a denigration as to, well, you must be unintellectual, you must be, unintelligent because you believe in the existence of God or you're a Christian. I never really got that.
What was the biggest hurdle for you when you were questioning everything? Was there anything that stood out to you? A lot of people will say, how can God exist if you have things like childhood cancer or any of these horrible things? The tragedy with Charlie. How could a good, loving God allow something like that to happen where his wife and kids are left behind?
Yeah, I mean, that certainly was one of the issues that I had when I was questioning my faith. When you look at all of the tragedies that happen around the world and throughout history, how could a loving God allow that to happen? But then you have to take a step back and, well, God is not forcing us to do anything. Sin entered the world when Eve took the bite of the apple and Adam took the bite of the apple, and that's when the perfection of the world was destroyed, and then sin entered the world. And so when you look at it from that perspective, you can understand that, well, God doesn't want these things to happen, but people make decisions, and we're not robots. God is never going to force us to do anything. It's all about free will, and so you can choose to do evil or you can choose to do good. God's not going to force you to do good.
Do you think that to some degree that whole issue becomes moot when you get down to whether Jesus was who he said he was? Because if Jesus was who he said he was and the resurrection is real, whether God does something that you think a loving God would do or that you agree with is totally irrelevant because you've established that he is God.
Right.
And what he says goes. And it's really not up to us to decide. Because if Jesus is who he says he was, then he's God and we either follow him and he's the only way, or the alternative is not good.
It's not good. That's right.
Am I right about that?
Well, it's interesting because I tell people that I have talked to, and they ask me, well, why are you a Christian? And I say, well, why are you not a Christian? I said, are you willing to roll the dice? Because it's, in a sense, you're rolling the dice. You're like, well, so if what I believe is right, then you get eternal life with Jesus. But if you don't believe what I believe, then you could end up in eternal punishment. So why? So what is there to lose if you decide to become a Christian?
Do they actually, would somebody who makes the decision for that choice actually be a believer, though? It's interesting because you have to believe
simply
in your
that,
heart.
right? Yeah, if it's simply that, it has to be more than that. But I think, as a starting point, think about it like that, and then sort of get into the more meat and potatoes of what it means to be a Christian and what Christianity is all about.
Yeah. Because Jesus says, if you confess with your mouth and believe in your heart, right?
Right.
And really what's important is, do you believe in your heart? Because a lot of people confess with their mouth and maybe don't believe in their heart. Mm-hmm. And one professor explained it that if he said, I'm going to give $50 to anyone who believes the next thing that I say. And then the next thing he says is, the building's on fire. And half the people run out of the room, run out of the building, the other half stay there. And then at the end, everybody comes back. He hands the $50 bill to the people who left the building. And one of the guys who says, hey, I believed what you said. I need the $50. And he says, well, how could you have believed it if you really believed it? You would have run out of the building, right?
Right.
That makes it difficult sometimes with witnessing to other people, too, because you have to be sensitive not to shove things down people's throats.
Right.
And you have to be mindful when you're having these discussions with other people who might be in sensitive places. But at the same time, I understand the point of people who say, if somebody's about to walk off a cliff, I'm going to want to yell at them and say, hey, hold on,
Sure.
there's a cliff coming up.
Right.
And not just like, he'll figure it out when he's ready.
Well, it's always interesting. There are no atheists when the plane's going down.
Yeah,
You know?
it's true. Unfortunately, sometimes it takes very drastic things to happen
Extreme
for
things.
people to come to the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So when we talk about whether God exists and everything like that, and get back to the resurrection and that being the ultimate determining factor for Christians, when you get into why people don't make that decision, do you think a lot of times they have things in their lives that they simply don't want to give up, that they know they'll have to?
Oh, certainly. I mean, living the Christian life is not easy. I mean, there are things that are very, very countercultural, and there are things that require sacrifice. But if you look at it from a life perspective, what in life is worth it if you don't have to sacrifice, if you don't have to work for it? Usually people don't get things for free in life. You have to work, you have to sacrifice, you have to have discipline. And I think when you look at what the Bible commands us to do, it only makes your life better. It doesn't make it worse. And if people can get that understanding and realize that, you know, God's not trying to make your life miserable. He's actually trying to make your life a lot better. And if you follow these commands, your life will be infinitely better. And I think when people start to realize that when they start following the teachings of the Bible and the teachings of Jesus, that their life becomes exponentially better.
And that's something that I've tried to be honest about, particularly on this program, is that being a Christian can sometimes be miserable. There are, like you said,
100%.
Bad things that happen, you get attacked,
Mm-hmm.
and there's this trend of, they call it prosperity gospel, where it kind of makes it seem like if you become a Christian, your life's going to be flowers for the rest of your life,
Right.
and you're going to get everything you ever wanted and everything.
Right. Not gonna happen.
It's simply, doesn't the Bible say that we're going to be attacked by fiery darts or something like that?
Persecuted. Oh, yeah, sure, yeah.
What do you think about that, though, that this prosperity aspect has become so popular and putting it out there? Do you think you end up with false converts as a result of that?
100%. It is, because it's a false gospel at the end of the day. It's not what the Bible teaches, and they're trying to, I don't know, I mean, I don't want to call people charlatans, but in a sense, that's what they are. And if you look at a lot of these big mega church pastors who are preaching this sort of health and wealth prosperity gospel, a lot of them are incredibly wealthy. I mean, you look at a guy like Kenneth Copeland. I mean, the guy's got a private jet. I mean, all kinds of things. And I know that there have been people who have tried to interview him, tried to challenge him on what he's doing, and he pretty much just shuts it down. His security get in the way, and nobody ever really gets close to him. But yeah, it's a big problem, because these people are leading people completely away from Jesus.
Yeah. Is your dad still around?
He is. He actually just retired this past spring after 45 years.
Wow.
Yeah, being a pastor, 45 years, and now he's just enjoying retirement.
Where was his church or anything?
In Boston.
Oh.
It was in Boston.
Any
Yeah,
episodes available on social media, YouTube, or anything like that you can find virtually?
Oh, sure, yeah. So the church was People's Baptist Church in Boston. It's actually the oldest Black Baptist church north of the Mason-Dixon line. It was actually founded in 1805, so it's a very, very historic church. Actually, when my dad retired, he was on the front page of the Boston Globe.
Wow.
So yeah, it was a really, really big deal. Yeah,
That's incredible.
There were reporters that were following him around basically like for a year before he actually retired. So yeah, it was.
Did they know he was conservative?
Well, my dad's not that conservative, though.
Oh,
surprisingly
really?
enough. Yeah, my mom is very conservative. My dad is definitely more on the liberal side, although he doesn't talk about politics at all. Like he's not one of the. I mean, you see these pastors who are constantly talking about politics within their services and within the church. But I mean, that's a violation of their 501c3 status. You're really not supposed to be talking about politics. So he makes a concerted effort, does not talk about politics at all.
No, that's good.
It's all about Jesus. That's it. just about the gospel. Yeah.
And really, that's the most important thing. I think that
It is.
we've put too much stock into politics these days.
We have.
And particularly if we want this nation to be headed in the right direction, our primary goal should be to lead people to Jesus.
Right.
And we basically are in a position where a lot of people are worshiping politicians, political parties, political platforms, and that's not going to cut it long term, is it?
And political differences don't need to separate us. Look at my mom and dad. They've been married for 63 years. My mom is very conservative. My dad's, I think my dad's a moderate liberal, but they don't necessarily agree on most political issues, but yet,
So even like a political issue like abortion, Dad would be on the other side of that?
No, I don't know about that. Yeah, he'd be more, more of the moderate Democrats, because there are a lot of moderate Democrats who are pro-life. So he'd certainly be more on the pro-life side.
There were many years ago, at least.
There were, yeah.
In Pennsylvania, we had Casey. His son was a politician here as of very recently. But the father was a Democrat, and I was at a pro-life event with Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and they showed a video of the father, Casey, talking in the 80s about how the abortion issue is like a bone in the throat of the United States of America, and until we get rid of that, we're going to keep choking. That's a Democrat saying that in the 1980s. It's almost like the Second Amendment, too. There used to be plenty of pro-gun Democrats. Now they've kind of gone the way of the dodo.
Right.
So a lot of these issues where people could be a Democrat and still believe in these certain principles is just very difficult these days.
Now it is, because I think the far left radical wing of the Democrat Party has kind of hijacked it. So everything's moving farther and farther and farther left. I mean, we look at what's going on in the New York City mayoral race with Voddie. I mean, we could have a literal communist as the mayor of the largest city in the United States. I mean, it looks like might win unless either Eric Adams or Andrew Cuomo drops out. I think he might win by default.
Wow. And do you think that it might be good for the people to get what they want in that situation? Because it's only one way to, unfortunately, sometimes you got to learn the hard way.
Sometimes you do have to learn the hard way, and I think that people will soon realize that this was a big, big mistake. And I think it's also very damaging to the Democrat Party. So, for example, Governor Hochul of New York recently endorsed this guy. I think that once the Democrats start getting in bed with socialists, with communists, with people who are so far left of center, you start to make it impossible for the average American to vote for you. Like, how are you possibly, if your party is affiliated or associated with something so extreme, how are you ever going to win another general election? Because people aren't on those extremes. They're in the middle, and it's more common sense ideas that resonate with the vast majority of Americans, and socialism certainly doesn't resonate.
It's funny that you have people on the left who'll ask you, how can you be in the same party with some white supremacist who's in the woods in the middle of nowhere that nobody's ever heard of, yet they on their side are outwardly endorsing candidates like this.
Yeah. This is all out in the open. This isn't someone hiding off in some backwoods area. This is someone who's going to become mayor of New York City.
And it's not like they happen to be in the same party. It's you should vote for this person.
Sure.
They're putting their support behind them. Yeah. It's just mind blowing.
Yeah, I think the Democrats really need to sort of get back to like the more moderate Clinton type Democrat Party if they ever want to really regain power, because I think this whole woke thing and the very, very far left stuff, I think it's a losing proposition. We saw it was a losing proposition in 2024.
It's funny because I took speeches that were given by Obama, Chuck Schumer, and Bill Clinton, and got somebody to run it through AI with Trump's voice.
Oh, really? That's great.
And they were all about
Sound the same.
Illegal immigration.
Right. Yep.
Because
Clinton was very outspoken about illegal immigration.
Yeah, State of the Union address. Even Obama when he was in the primaries, and Schumer at some point, and then for some reason it just completely turned upside down, and
it completely changed.
And that's not the case anymore. We don't believe in that anymore. I read an article once that said that if you get into lifting weights and physical fitness, that you become a right-wing expletive is what they put in there.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
That's so
you're
interesting.
You're more likely to become a right-wing, I don't even want to.
Really? I wonder why that is.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what, sort of working out has to do with your political affiliation. I'm not sure.
Well, I could see how the I don't agree with the expletive, but I could
Right.
see how some of the values that you learn through physical fitness would have you tend to lean more conservative. Things like discipline, things like personal accountability, because the people who don't consistently exercise, or we saw this fit at any size movement a few
Oh,
years
sure.
back,
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
which
yeah.
somehow all went out the window once there was a shot that can
Right, yeah,
once
yeah,
there was
yeah.
a shot that can change all
Sure.
that. Never mind about this body positivity stuff.
Right.
But there were a lot of excuses on that side, whereas people who were in the gym, they're dedicated. I'm in 6 days a week. Your team, no days off, it sounds like.
Yeah.
But for people who have that schedule and stick to that schedule and see that you can control the things you can control, like what goes into your body,
Exactly.
and being in a calorie deficit.
Sure. Yeah.
Which nobody wants to hear that, right?
Nobody
Nobody
wants
wants
to
to be in a calorie deficit consistently over the course of a year, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
I don't wanna hear
Deprivation.
that.
Nobody wants to hear about deprivation.
Yeah.
Not at all.
So I can see how some of the values, like sacrificing and being disciplined and sticking to things and overcoming adversity, pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Right.
I can
More
see how this
conservative,
more
sure.
conservative.
I can see that,
Than the
yeah.
other side. It's like,
Right.
I have this strange condition that even if I eat 1,200 calories, I never lose any weight. It's like, get
Right.
out of here. That's nonsense.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's handcuff myself to you for 3 days, and we're going to figure out that you're not eating 1,200 calories
Exactly.
at all, right?
And that's the hardest thing. The hardest thing is the discipline aspect of it. I always tell people in the gym, you'll never outwork your diet. If you are not strict in the kitchen, it doesn't matter what you do in the gym, because what you put in is what you're going to see. So I tell people that all the time. A lot of guys go to the gym, they think they can eat McDonald's and fast food and all this stuff because they're working out, and they wonder why they don't see changes in their body. You have to be disciplined. What do they say? Abs start in the kitchen. Yeah, so definitely that's 100% correct.
It seems that every time somebody talks to me who's struggling with weight, whether it's a friend or a family member, and I ask them, well, how many calories are you eating a day? And they say, well, not that many.
Right.
Okay, well, how many is not that many? Are you tracking over a consistent period? And it's got to be more than 2 or 3 days in a row. And you got to, if you're eating this many calories and you're not losing weight, you have to eat fewer calories.
Right. And the eyeball test, it's all actually been shown that when people eyeball their food, they're eating far more than they think they are. Way more. So, I mean, to bring yourself into a deficit, you really, really have to cut down.
Use a scale, right?
Use a scale. Yeah, use a weight scale. That's why I recommend that, yeah.
And you get all those serving sizes burned into your brain
That's right.
as to how
You know
much everything is.
You know exactly what you're eating. Yeah.
So you were talking about how you've had some injuries that required surgery.
Yeah.
So you had the hip and the
The
shoulder.
hip and the shoulder, yeah.
What were those from?
I think it was just from working out. I mean, the surgeons both said that I was a prime candidate just because I was a former athlete and I was working out, and joints just wear out at some point. So yeah, it was just overuse over time.
Is there anything that you'd recommend to people to prevent something like that from happening, or maybe not end up in a position where you're having those surgeries?
If you're lifting, it's fine to go heavy, but know that there's a price to pay. Because I think that everybody does this when they're young. It's all about ego lifting. That's it. And until you really sort of figure out what your body needs, then you start to turn away from, trying to lift, maxing out all the time. And that just puts an inordinate amount of stress on your joints. And that's what ends up happening when, you do that for a number of years and then you have to get a joint replaced.
And we know from the studies that if you're in the 5 to 30 rep range and you're getting close to failure, like within 3 reps in reserve to failure, that you can see hypertrophy.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I tell people, stick between like sort of the 8 to 12 range. If you're going, below 8, then your body really isn't going to be in a state of hypertrophy, especially if you're taking a lot of rest between sets. You have to really minimize the rest. A lot of people are like, oh, I just like think about how much rest. No, get your iPhone out, set it for like a minute, and just be disciplined like that, because a minute goes by very, very quickly.
I mean, it's tough. But if you're getting close to failure in that follow-up set, then
Exactly,
you're testing the muscle to the degree
Mm-hmm.
that you need for hypertrophy.
Yeah.
I honestly find that these days I'm closer in the 15 to 20 rep range, which is better on my joints at that later.
Well, I have to now. So my shoulder surgeon told me that any type of shoulder press or chest press exercise, I have to do no less than 20. He's like, if you want your shoulder to last, you've got to go higher reps, lighter weight.
And were you doing straight bar for bench press and everything like that, or are you doing dumbbells?
No, I was doing more dumbbells. Yeah, I was doing more dumbbell work. I was doing free weight squats, so that means squats, bent over rows for barbells. But like in terms of like my chest stuff, I was doing primarily dumbbells, just because I like the ability to manipulate the dumbbells and angle them. Whereas with the straight bar, it's just there. It's very, very static.
Yeah. And you can only come down so far if you really want a full range of motion with a deep stretch.
Yeah.
It's either got to be one of those cambered bars or the
exactly.
dumbbells.
And I found that with flat bench too, is that it puts a lot of strain on your front delt. You know, a lot of strain. So yeah.
One thing you mentioned, the hip, that's from
running. Yeah. Running, and then heavy squats too.
Did you continue to run in some capacity after you were finished? So like as a part of training, were you running?
I did. I ran in the gym, ran on treadmills, and then I got away from that. I started doing more stairs, just because it was a little bit different, and it was challenging too. Stairs are very, very challenging, so I started doing that more in terms of my cardio.
And did you find that put any stress on your joints?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Anything like that. I mean, the stairs, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I felt it in my knees. Definitely felt it in my hip. Is weird but my hip, I actually felt it when I was doing the adductor machine. You know that machine where you're pushing the weight
outwards.
Yeah, and that's when I first felt it, and then I was like, ooh, that doesn't feel good. So I stopped doing that, but I didn't go to the surgeon probably for like, I don't know, maybe like 6 or 7 months until it got really, really painful.
Yeah, it's a very tough injury. I had 3 knee surgeries that ultimately ended up with the valgus malalignment, so I walked around with a crooked leg. This is when I was playing college ball. So ultimately what ended my career. And going back, they told me you're going to need a knee replacement by the time you're 30. I toughed it out and made it past that, but then started to have hip problems in that same side.
Because things start to they try to
walking crooked, compensating.
Right. Yeah.
So a couple of years back, I went to one of the good places for joint surgery out here that do professional athletes. And the doctor comes in and says, "It is impressive what you have done to your hip at your age." And basically told me it's going to have to go.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it at that time. It said labrum's torn in 2 places and need to get this replaced.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
I was at a point in time where full-time caretaker for a family member and getting surgery and being down for that amount of time wasn't an option.
Right.
Made a challenge to myself because I figured can't get any worse, right? Bones all worn down and everything.
Sure.
Where I had always sort of shied away from full range of motion, anything lower body, because of the injury. And sort of go to 90 degrees. I said, I'm going to try body weight, full range of motion, holding on to something for assistance, and maybe I can get 4 done today, and I'll get 5 done the next day, and sort of work it up. And over the course of a year with full range of motion, and interestingly enough, wearing barefoot shoes and walking and really concentrating on form while walking. And when you're wearing barefoot shoes, you can't stomp around.
Right.
We don't think about that. When we're walking around and we've got cushions on our feet, every time we slam our foot on the ground, that impact goes all the way up through our joints.
Right.
But if you're wearing barefoot shoes, you kind of got to walk like a ballerina, and you don't have that repeated stress. I've gotten to a point now where I'm not pain-free, but I've avoided having to get the surgery.
Oh, great. Wow.
But you don't think about that when you're 18 to 20 years old and you're in college and you're trying to squat 465.
Right. Yeah. That's right.
So if anybody is listening to what we're talking about right now, don't be a hero. There are ways to do this.
And you don't need to lift heavy to create a great physique.
No.
You really don't have to. Most of it has to do with your diet and the way that you train. It's not about the weight that you train. You have to know the correct exercises, doing correct form. Those are all super, super important. I think more important than lifting heavy weight.
And particularly when you're doing full range of motion, your timing's down, you're going slow on the eccentric and getting that deep stretch.
You can't go heavy.
You're going to grow.
Yeah, you're going to grow.
And your weights are going to necessarily be lighter, which a lot of people, that's why a lot of people don't want to do it. They don't want to see that number go down.
That's exactly right.
But you will see the results.
Right. Dorian Yates is a big proponent of that, like really going down on when you're bringing the weights down. Yeah, slowing it down a lot.
Have you ever been to Gold's Venice?
I have not. I have not. I'd love to go one day.
We have to get you out to Gold's Venice.
Got to check it out.
As much as California,
the Mecca.
Yeah, as much as California is not on our page politically,
right,
that place is a very, very special, magical place to be able to live outside.
Sure,
I was blessed to be there almost every day for a year while I was out there, and got to meet some great people over there who actually were on our side.
Oh wow,
which is cool.
Yeah. There are a lot more conservatives in California than people know.
Yeah,
a lot more.
Just driving around in Uber, people would start the conversation about that. And it's like, I had one Uber driver tell me that he goes home to his wife and says, "They say that 80 million people voted for Biden. I haven't met any of them driving around in Uber."
That's great. I love it. That's awesome.
So we've really run the gamut here. Talked about everything from fitness to the law to Jesus to politics. Anything else you want to talk about?
I think we've covered everything. I mean, we really haven't talked too much about gender ideology.
Is that important to you?
That is important to me because my daughter was when she was younger. She was very active in sports, and I would have a real problem if there was a biological boy who was competing against her in soccer. And we've seen instances where girls have been injured as a result of biological boys playing against them, whether it's basketball, volleyball, or just medals being taken away. I mean, I think last year there was that big case in California where there was that track athlete in high school who was a biological boy competing in the women's division and was winning all of the events. And then what Riley Gaines, obviously, I mean, everybody knows who she is, and having to compete against Leah Thomas, who's a fully intact 6'3" foot male who was destroying everybody. So I mean that's a big issue. I don't have issues with people living their lives because that's what makes America great. But the idea that you're not making the playing field equitable, you're essentially destroying Title IX when you do that. I mean, Title IX was designed for women so that women would have their own sports. If there are no differences between men and women, then why do they have different leagues in sports? Why do they have women's events in the Olympics and men's events in the Olympics? I mean, if everything was to be the same, you'd never see women winning anything. And over the course of the last, I don't know how many years, I think several hundred medals, I think maybe even close to 1,000 medals have been lost by biological women to biological males around the world. So it's a problem. Even though it's a very, very tiny percentage of the population, it's still a problem. Just because it's a small problem doesn't mean that it's not an important problem.
I suggested once, trolling on social media, that we should just get rid of the gender separation in sports altogether, and the best person for the job gets the best person gets the position. And somebody who was previously advocating for it's not a big deal if the trans compete was saying, well, then it wouldn't be fair. You'd have to say so many women have to be fielded on each team. I said, why?
Yeah, right, exactly. There's no difference.
There's no difference. Why?
Right. That's right.
It kind of brings the point home there. And unfortunately, sometimes you see this play out with more of a dangerous situation than anything else. That's when it really gets sad, right?
Like the Olympic
swimming's
boxer.
One thing.
Yeah, and like the Olympic boxer that hit that Italian boxer, and she quit after 40 seconds because she had never been hit that hard. And people know that this person had tested for male chromosomes. So that's a big problem. And again, people should be able to live their lives. And the thing that I don't like is that we as conservatives get termed transphobe, homophobe. We're not afraid of anybody. We don't wish hate on anybody. We want people to certainly live their lives the way that they want to live, but we don't want their rights to impose on the rights of others. I think that's only fair.
As long as you're not hurting other people, right?
Right, yeah.
And we might not agree with certain things that they do, but that's okay.
Right.
We don't have to agree with everything
don't have to
everybody
agree.
does. It's not the government's job to intervene and dictate the way everybody lives their lives.
Right.
Do we hope that people become Christian and, follow the Bible? Yeah, sure we do.
Right.
But we're not here to force anybody to do that.
Not at all.
And there's no forced converts in Christianity, at least biblically, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that's one thing that's great about it.
Absolutely.
God wants you to choose Him.
That's right. That's right. He's there.
Yeah.
You just gotta make the decision.
And that is a big misconception, though, because you were talking about transphobes, homophobes, and everything like that. There seems to be this idea on the left that if you're conservative, some people go very extreme as to what they say. We don't like them and don't want them to exist, right?
Right. Yeah. Right.
Which is completely not true. I will say that I've seen people on our side say very mean things on occasion about trans people or whatever else the case may be. And I'm not about that. I don't think that's right. I think that that's not what Jesus would want us to do, is to make fun of people. But that doesn't mean that you have to let everybody play sports together, right? We're changing the same locker rooms. That's another thing that we didn't even talk about. Like you're saying you have a daughter.
It's women's spaces. I mean, why should you have men, exposing themselves to women or boys exposing themselves to girls? That just doesn't make any sense. It's one of these issues where the majority of Americans are on our side, but yet the Democrats refuse to acknowledge that, and I'm not sure exactly, why. But
have you ever been to any of the shooting ranges in New Jersey?
I have not. There's one not too far from me in Little Falls. That I know a few of my friends who are big gun enthusiasts go and to the range, but I've actually never been.
We're gonna have to make that happen, possibly before the end of the year if you're feeling up to it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, I'd love to go. I would love to go. I've never done it before, so certainly.
And are you back in the gym working out?
Yeah, I am back in the gym working out. Yeah, I can't even begin to tell you. I have never been injured before. And I'd never not worked out before. And so when I got back in the gym, especially with upper body, my left side was so incredibly weak. It was like I was starting from the very beginning almost. But then once my body started getting acclimated, then I started to, get back into it. So it took a little while in the beginning, but then it came back pretty quickly.
Did you start to see those newbie gains, like that growth?
Yeah, the newbie gains. Yeah.
It's awesome.
It was definitely newbie gains. Yeah. It was wild. I'd never experienced anything like that before.
Are we going to start to see some additional content on Instagram? It's been a while, right?
Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah, I've been recovering, going through the rehab. It's just it's so much time because I'm going to physical therapy 3 times a week. I'm trying to get my workouts in, and then on top of that, my shoulder surgeon wants me to do at-home exercises as well, because he basically told me in my last appointment, I think it was like 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, he said, I've done my job. You can't screw up the surgery. You're completely healed. Now it's your job to do what you need to do. So a lot of pressure there.
Well, on top of working, I know attorneys don't typically work long hours or anything like
yeah,
that,
right. And on top of that as well. I mean, when you factor in work hours and all that stuff and, do more with less and being, sort of down head count, I mean, it's madness. It's really, really hard to sort of manage your time. Time management is really, really critically important when you have so many different things going on. So,
well, hopefully we'll get some more Paul Roberts Pro content. Instagram at Paul Roberts Pro.
Yes.
Any parting words for our audience?
Oh wow! If you have been thinking about the gym, all you got to do is go. It's just a decision, and put blinders on when you go to the gym. Don't start comparing yourself to other people, because then you'll never go. Just think about what you need to do when you go to the gym. And just make right choices. Remember, everything in life is a choice. You can either choose to eat that burger or you can choose to eat the chicken breast. So remember that every single thing that you do in life is a choice, and you can make good choices, you can make bad choices.
And with the one thing that I had a big misconception about when I was playing ball is I always had it in my head that in order to be in shape, I had to eat things that I didn't like. So when I was on strict diets throughout the year and everything, I'd be eating cans of tuna and stuff like that. I can't stand it. I hate tuna. Right. But I would force myself to eat these specific things that I didn't like. It wasn't until getting back in shape after a lot of years of being off as an attorney,
Sure.
where I realized that you can figure out how to eat things that you like and
Tastes good.
fit into your macros and calories.
Absolutely, absolutely. Things do not have to taste bad. Healthy food can taste good. So that's definitely a misconception.
And if you don't like it, you don't have to eat it.
Don't
you can
have
find
to eat
a substitute.
There are a lot
that
of
fits.
options aside from tuna.
Anything about Jesus for the audience?
Oh yeah, Jesus is great. I mean, think about it. If you've been interested in learning about Christianity, I would highly recommend The Case for Christ. It's a riveting movie. You won't be bored. It's great. Even watch The Chosen. I would say look at The Chosen and watch it and see if it speaks to your heart. And if it does, think about finding a church. Think about starting your faith journey. I would highly recommend that. It'll change your life.
This is an awesome conversation. I really appreciate you coming to join us.
Absolutely.
It absolutely lived up to all of my wildest expectations. Because this has been probably a year and a half coming. We've been talking about
this. It's been a while. Yeah. And then I got derailed with all my surgeries. So.
Well, God bless you, brother. Thanks for being here.
You as well. Appreciate it.
We miss you, Ellie. Daddy loves you. Thanks for tuning into the Mike G and the Garbage Gang podcast. If you want to be a proud member of the Garbage Gang, we need you to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, check out one of the recommended videos, and comment. Tell us what you think. We love having you as a member of the Garbage Gang. We'll see you next time.